Welcome to another episode of Healthcare Connections podcast, powered by Healthcare Compliance Pros. I am your host, Jeremy Winn. Our purpose for this podcast is to introduce you to key topics and experts in the healthcare industry to ensure you have what you need to successfully manage your practice. Please subscribe and follow us on our social media channels to make sure you don't miss any new episodes. If you have recommendations for guests or topics for this podcast, email me at jwin@hcp.md. With that, enjoy this episode of the Healthcare Connections podcast. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Healthcare Connections podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Winn, the Director of Sales here at Healthcare Compliance Pros. I'm actually coming remotely today as I travel, so this is a little bit fun, but I'm excited to have this guest on. And I wanted to capture her when she had availability because her and I have been bouncing back and forth. But we've got Annie Hockey with us today. She is the President and Head of Consulting at SkyTale Group. Welcome, Annie.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So I'd love, if you don't mind, share a little bit about yourself, Annie, your background, what led you to joining SkyTale, and then we'll jump into SkyTale a little bit after that. But I'd love for the audience to get to know you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. My background's sort of a little bit of a hybrid consulting, advisory, and entrepreneurial. I began my career in early stage startups in Silicon Valley. I'm sitting today in San Francisco, which is where I spend most of my time. Ended up going back to Stanford to get my MBA and sort of decided, I'd get part one MBA in the classroom and then part two in one of these big consulting firms because I liked this toolkit all of them had and I wanted it. So I ended up spending a little bit of time at Bain and Company, based where I was based in the San Francisco office, and worked really at the intersection of their private equity and consumer retail practices, which was a treat because the assets we were looking at and working on were fun, right? Retail and skincare and all of those things. So it, spend time looking at assets on behalf of a buyer and or doing work post-purchase to optimize that business somehow. Ended up leaving Bain to start a firm of my own. So went back to that entrepreneurial life. Started a financial technology firm that's based in San Francisco. It's about 150 folks now. It's profitable, and I was able to hire an incredible executive team, and so I'm now a happy owner and board member, and was able to sort of find my way to SkyTale, which is really kind of the beautiful intersection of those two things. We are a firm that is growing and scaling, and we have, big ambitions for the firm. However, it just so happens to be a consulting firm in an industry, in a space that I absolutely love. So, there's a logic here, although the road here, could seem a little bit twisty-turny on paper.
I love it. I knew about your experience at Bain. Was not as familiar with the financial technology piece, so that was really cool to learn. And so, your journey to SkyTale. Thank you for sharing that. And as you get to SkyTale, you talked about some of the industries you love, and I know two key areas that you focus on are dental and med spa. But I'd love to maybe give the audience kind of the full picture of SkyTale and everything that you're doing there.
Yeah, I'd love to. So SkyTale Group is a boutique healthcare focused investment banking and management consulting firm. So on the investment banking side, that team is typically representing a practice or a company that is going to market, for some type of capital raise or investment, or typically right now outright sale to, say, a private equity firm. On the consulting side of the house, we do a lot of work for provider owners, helping them scale, optimize their business, maybe get ready for a sale. But we also do an increasing amount of work with financial sponsors. So, buy side diligence, survey work, integration plans, and then, of course, post-purchase, just platform strategy and value creation. But to your point, in terms of kind of what sectors we serve, we started in dental and do kind of all those associated fields, the ortho and surgery and implants, et cetera. we have kind of found ourselves to be really a leader, a dominant player in the medical aesthetics space. And that is, I would broadly include anything from surgical plastic surgery, right, to classic med spa, to now this sort of booming area of functional wellness and longevity and weight loss, that we're really seeing the intersection of those things come together.
Yep.
But we do across the board healthcare, some pharma, life sciences, a decent amount of consumer now, just because um, med spa, it's a cash pay business. It's a really consumer forward business. So our aperture is of course wider than just the med spa and the dental.
Awesome. I love that. Let's dive into med spa a little bit more because it is this booming space and there's lots of specialties that are trying to add these services to their practice, right? Or start a complementary practice separate that's offering these aesthetic services. I'd love to learn more about some of the trends that you're seeing in the medical aesthetic space, whether it's new treatments, the growth that's happening in the space, the consolidation, et cetera. With your experience as you're advising and consulting these groups, I'd love to get to your inside scoop on this.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like a few years ago, folks caught on that med spas are recurring revenue with an insane margin,
Yeah.
all cash pay. And suddenly a lot of folks came a knocking. And so, to your point, of course, lots of folks are starting med spas of their own, providers who are doing that aesthetics treatments, but we have seen so many, gynecologists adding a med spa, dentists adding a med spa, eye docs adding a med spa. It's always kind of interesting to see the way in which they think about adjacencies in like their current service line,
Yes.
and then aesthetics in general. But a few trends that we're seeing. I mentioned it before, but I do think wellness and longevity, sort of all of those associated things, have become not only a buzzword, but in many ways kind of almost a necessity. A lot of folks are thinking about if their clients, their patients are receiving some of these services elsewhere, are they going to go there for their aesthetics
Right.
treatments too? And so, do I need to add on some of these things because they are becoming really status quo? I think, GLP-1s sort
Yeah.
of accelerated this. Again, it's an incredibly lucrative business line, and we can talk about upsides and downsides of that. But even now with hormone replacement therapy, in menopause, if we think that injectables are sticky, hormone therapy is incredibly sticky. Once people start, it's a pretty life-changing experience, right? They don't necessarily stop. Um, and where we get really excited is the coupling of these two things, right? What we don't want to see is customers who go in for the wellness treatments and patients that go in for the aesthetics treatments, right? It should
Right.
all be a cross sell. If someone is doing weight loss and their body is suddenly changing, how can they preventatively come up with a treatment plan so that they don't see the signs of aging or skin, you know, sort of relaxing as a
Right.
result of that. So that's been a really fun. I mean, the industry moves really quickly, so it's been really fun to spend a lot of time on the wellness side, and of course that comes with many compliance concerns, issues, whatever you want to call it, of its own.
Absolutely. It does. And that's where we, kind of come in play a little bit as we get involved with these clients. It's the fastest growing area for us in our business is, medical spa and aesthetics groups coming, looking for support, looking for help. So let's navigate there on the compliance side. That's an area we love. What are some of the common questions that you get from clients? What's the guidance that you're giving to them? What are the areas they need to be aware of? I mean, there's so many questions we could ask around this, but I guess overall, from compliance, I'd love to hear your take.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, it's interesting because the types of questions that are being asked of us by, say, a single location med spa provider are oftentimes a little bit different than a platform, right? A consolidator that might
Correct.
have
Yeah.
med spas across multiple states, and therefore, many more providers, many more patients, and therefore their liability goes sort of up and up and up. And so, I think it's become not on the list. I think compliance is come to the top of the list for many of these firms in terms of priority areas. And I think that there's sort of two things that make it tricky. One, it's always changing, and two,
Always.
it's different in every state.
Yes.
And we really do recommend working with experienced advisors and companies like you all to come up with a cohesive program. But I'd say typically top of mind for us would be MD, medical director oversight.
Yep.
Do they need to be on prem? Do they not need to be on prem? How much time do they need to be spending on this? How many practices, whether
Right.
it's the same business or otherwise, can they oversee? So that's always top of mind. Who can do what, right? That really differs per state. Like,
The delegation piece is huge, right?
yeah,
In each state.
exactly. And then compensation, all sorts of things. And one of the things that I sort of always say is, if it's not written and documented somewhere, it didn't happen. And that's why having tools that keep track of forms and keep track of signatures and all of those compliance documents to just prove out that you did these things are so critical. And I know that that's one of the services that you all provide, so people can just have that peace of mind and know where to go if someone were ever to ask for that type of resource.
Absolutely. And I think with the growth of the industry, you're starting to see, certainly from a federal level, right? There's a lot of eyes on it right now, and pretty soon that means there's going to be a lot of hands on it, from a regulation standpoint. But traditionally, because of the cash pay element, a lot of it falls to the state medical boards. And
Yeah.
so, we advise our clients all the time, you got to pay attention to your state medical boards. What are they looking at? Because we're starting to see policies, we're starting to see additional regulations pop up in each state. Most famously was, the recent one, which ended up not passing, but in Texas.
Yeah.
If you want to give just a brief overview of kind of what they were looking at there, because it's a model that others, I think, were paying attention to all over the country. And ultimately, it ended up not happening. But yeah, I would love
Yeah.
an example there from you.
And we're finding, in I think a really wonderful way. Well, I would say this, as a premise, I think that regulation will, for the most part, be good for the industry, because
Yeah,
all of us are here to have safe and effective outcomes, right? Like, the
correct.
worst thing for our industry is to have people who are put in danger and injured, or worse. And so in many ways it is good. It keeps us all on our toes and sort of working towards a higher threshold. That said, there have been some more kind of draconian bills that have been put out there. Some have passed, some have not, right? So in New Mexico, for example, you do need to have a physician on prem. That really shifts your business model fundamentally. And that was the consideration in Texas. And most of these models are built on having incredible providers, PAs, RNs, NPs on the ground. However, MDs not necessarily needing to be there, and honestly not really the ones doing the treatments. And so,
Right.
In Texas, for example, having a physician on staff full time, I mean, that would be, I think we'd figure it out. Aesthetics are here to stay. People will get their injectables, et cetera, but it would really shift our margin profile and the way in which we're working.
Absolutely. The dynamic, the structure of a practice, everything would shift dramatically with those things. So yeah, I appreciate that insight. And again, we'll continue to see, we are seeing, new things introduced every single year, which is why, keeping up to date on it is so important. Having a group, an advisor, whether it's your general counsel, just somebody that you can rely upon, to say, hey, can you keep eyes on what my state is doing? Or if you're multi-state, can you keep eyes from federal perspective, multiple states, because it will constantly change. And we've had situations where we've had potential client, people come to us and say, all of my med spas in this state were just shut down. And
Yeah.
we had to stop. We had to stop for a time until we figured this out. We were not aware of this rule that was in effect in this state, but not in the other 3 states that we're in. And so it's been really fascinating to see the evolution. And you're exactly right. It's here to stay. And I think because these procedures, these aesthetic procedures, they're becoming more widely accepted, I guess, and common. And you're even seeing it, traditionally, I think the patients have been females, but you're starting to see more and more men participating in some of these things. And so it's an industry that's going to
Yeah.
keep booming.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It's
so I,
really
I don't think regulation is going to necessarily send it away, but it will shift the growth, I think, a little bit. And it'll, those that are serious about staying on top of those things will be the ones that in the end continue to grow and find success.
No, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And it's been really fun to watch. Obviously, we're data junkies over here, and so it's been really fun to watch the overall composition of the market over time and how it's shifted. And the number of men as a percentage of the total market it's doubled over the past year or two.
Yeah.
Gen Z, as a percentage of the market, I think grew from 29 or so percent in 2017 to I think about 35% last year. And they're doing preventative, not only
Right.
injections, but also lasers, right, which are really high margin treatments. And so I think it's not only more accepted, but it's much more adopted. And candidly, I think the new foray into wellness is almost another acquisition channel for a whole different demographic that maybe wouldn't necessarily find themselves in a med spa, but they would find themselves there to think about getting labs and optimizing their peptides that they're taking. And then, while
Right.
I'm here, maybe if my person's sales rep does a good job, maybe I'll try out this little thing
Yeah.
over here. So
I never would have thought to come here for this,
yeah,
but wow, I'm here now. I'm more
exactly,
comfortable with what I'm doing. Maybe I will look at this. Yep.
exactly.
Very cool. So, for those that want to work with you, Annie, because again, you and your team are just doing an amazing job for your clients. What's the best way to contact you?
Oh, well, thank you for saying that. We are obsessed with our clients over here, so that's why we do what we do. But you can contact us at info@skytailgroup.com, and someone from our team will get back to you. SkyTail Speed.
SkyTale Speed. I love it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, Annie, thank you for getting together. Again, I know we've been working on this for weeks to
Yeah.
find some time, and we were able to do it. I appreciate it, and look forward to probably another follow up conversation over the coming months as we get additional updates on this industry.
I would love that and welcome that, and it was a treat. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Annie.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Healthcare Connections podcast. For more information on the topic we covered today, you can reach out to me or to our guest. For any additional information on healthcare compliance pros, feel free to email me at jwin@hcp.md. Don't forget to tune in next week. Thank you.